Serious? People who have happened upon dead corpses randomly. What happened? In my mid-20s walking to work I saw 3 homeless men sitting against a brick wall drinking by some railroad tracks behind a Target. One of the men looked a little off but I couldn't tell why till I got a little closer. He had some blood leaking from his ears, nose, eyes, mouth, not thick blood but watery. I told the 2 men their friend looks like he needs help and they just stared off into the distance. When I crossed the street and got to work I told my co-workers what I saw. About 20 minutes later a co-worker called me over to a window to point out a coroner's van loading a body across the street. After work, I walked back to where I found the 3 men earlier and counted 15 empty vanilla extract bottles. I have the impression he drank them all. In a retirement home I walked into a room to an old man lying on the couch. I thought the old man was sleeping so I shut the door. 2 hours later we saw paramedics walk into his room. A guy at my university was walking to class with his earbuds in and his hood over his head. He walked right across train tracks lost in thought while other people were screaming at him that the train was coming. I was about 2 minutes behind and saw the immediate results of this guy not paying attention. It's a weird feeling. The matter-of-fact nature of seeing a dead person. It's not like anything else changes. The train stopped. The people who saw it were horrified. And the police came. But before the end of the week, no one at the school was even talking about it. As a teenager in 1987, I found a dead prostitute on my first day of work at a McDonald's. She had hung herself on the tall fence surrounding our dumpster compactor area. I freaked and got my manager. In my second year at university, my good friend at the time went missing for 2 days and after getting the warden to come with me and check his room, we found him dead. He had committed suicide in the 2 days I hadn't seen him. What still haunts me is that my last message to him was, "Hey man, you still alive?" in a joking way. Safe to say I've never sent anyone a message like that again. On a drive to work early one morning I came down a hill to see a vehicle off in a field to my right. It was upside down and on fire so I immediately stopped and called 911. As I was running up to the vehicle, I could see the driver still strapped in. He wasn't moving or screaming, so I could only assume he was already dead. I couldn't get to him because of the fire. I really struggled with that for a while. When I was living in San Francisco there is a homeless person sprawled on the ground. I asked some passerby if we should call an ambulance and the guy at the store we were near said the homeless person did this all the time to get tips. I got what I needed from down the street and on my way back I saw him being zipped up in a body bag by some paramedics. One morning last November I woke up and walked into my great-grandmother's room to tell her good morning like I had always done many times before. She didn't respond, which was normal since dementia had kicked in and we had been having hospice over. It wasn't till a few minutes later that my grandma told me that she had died sometime in the middle of the night. I didn't even realize she was gone, so I kayaking and found a man whose decomposition was at the burst stage. Another time I was part of the recovery of a scuba diver who had been lost inside a San Diego for about a month at approx 120 FSW. His mask came off and eyeballs fell out as he was pushed through to me. Found a dead guy at the train station by where I used to live. Not sure what happened, but I thought he was just a drunk waiting for the train. He was sort of sitting with his head down. I tapped him in a lame attempt to wake him up and got nothing. I shook him a little harder and he just sort of slumped to the side, and when his head went back, his face was grey and his eyes were open but empty. Called the cops who came and gave my statement. And AMP X200B. Another time was walking to lunch with a friend in Nick. A guy had jumped out of a window. Older buildings have windows that open, even 20 or 30 stories up. He nosedived, bounced hard off a cab and was flopped in the street while the cops put the sheet down. Blood everywhere. Meanwhile, the passers-by stood there with their phones out taking pictures. I've come across multiple corpses, mainly living in Seattle. Most of the time, they were overdoses. The usual giveaway that they were dead, especially in the winter, would be to notice missing shoes. Not making a joke. It's just other homeless people would take their shoes if they were decent. The first time it was a bit jarring to see. The second, third, 14th time etc not as much. My mom found a dead body on the hiking trail near our house in California. Still being guarded by the family dog. She couldn't even get close. It happened to be a classmate's father, who had a heart attack. I also saw a guy step in front of a car on purpose one night, and held his hand as he died. By that time, I was very used to seeing dead bodies, and it didn't really faze me. In my junior year of high school, my best friend and I were skipping school and walking around the woods by Murphy Park in Park Forest, Chicago Heights. There was an older man sitting on a bench on the trail. Briefcase, suit, etc. He reached into the briefcase when he saw us, pulled out a revolver, shoved it in his mouth, and ended himself. My friend and I sat there and freaked before we ran to his house over on Dogwood and called the cops. I don't know the story. All I know is I have never forgotten that smell since then. Also, we didn't end up getting in trouble for skipping, so we had that going for us, which was nice. Happened at my elementary school party back around 1998. We were having a party at this teacher's house with about 30 other kids and 4 other chaperones. There was a pool in the back that was about 8 feet deep. We were all jumping in and out of the pool and it was dark out. Eventually the teachers told us all to come inside because it was almost time to go home. As we're all getting out of the pool, there was still someone at the bottom and wasn't moving. One of the chaperones jumped in and grabbed him. He was already dead. The whole school had a memorial for him and it was all honestly just a horrible time. Friday I was on the train in the morning and noticed a homeless guy wrapped up in a sleeping bag laying under one of the benches at one of the stations. Going home, went through the same station and noticed the guy was wrapped up in the same exact place and hadn't moved. It was also in the 90s by that time in the day, so there's no way someone would be bundled up like that. I called the local PD to check as I was on the train and it's not a station I have to get out at. Pretty sure I reported a body. I was coming back from my grandparents' house and saw a dead body hanging from a tree. I was 13. Back in 2010 I was on the train coming home from classes. When approaching the station there was a loud bang and people started flooding off the train, screaming and crying. I knew something bad had happened, but I didn't know what. The platform was sheer chaos and I cautiously walked up the platform to figure out what to do. That's when I saw him. A 6-7-year-old boy had been running with his grandfather to catch his train and let go of his grandfather's hand. He tripped and went between the train and platform, killing him instantly. All I could see were his legs, and his grandfather slumped over next to the body. I immediately went into shock and had to get on a bus to get back home. I remember seeing one of my classmates on the bus, and I must have been in some state as I vaguely recall the whole bus just looking at me as I told her what had happened. Really messed me up for a long time. When I was maybe 8 or 9, I went to visit my grandpa in the nursing home. I went to go get a snack from the vending machine and wandered around a little bit. I guess I got turned around and ended up walking into a random room thinking it was my grandpa's. There was a man laying in bed, eyes wide open and mouth agape. Being the weirdly cheerful kid I was, I loudly said, "Hi mister. Do you know where my bupper's grandpa's nickname room is?" No answer, but a nurse heard me from the hall. She recognized me from earlier and knew which room I was looking for. She apologized to the guy, but sounded worried when he did not respond. When I got back to my parents, we were getting ready to leave and we saw some people wheeling a body bag out of the same guy's room. I walked out a building in downtown Phoenix one day and saw a person who had just jumped fallen from the top. I assume it was the top, I didn't see it happen, of a parking structure next to the Wells Fargo building. The police had just gotten there. Or was it the EMTs? This was 5-6 years ago, so it's hard to remember, but the scene was new. The poor person was definitely deceased. I didn't know what to do, so I stood there for a minute or two. It was pretty shocking. The responders blocked off the area with tape. I left. Drug raid happened near our house. I live in the Philippines. While biking down the road down the house, I find an arm sticking out of one of the nearby bushes. Thought it was a mannequin arm or something, since one of our neighbors is a seamstress. Ride over it thinking nothing of it when all of a sudden, crunch. I found out it was one of the druggies who got away but ended up dying of blood loss from being shot. Still had a knife in his hand. Safe to say I don't go on that route when biking to my friend's house. Not sure if this counts, but when I was 15, I was going to a friend's house. My city has trains that go across the city. Open bracket. Not sure if relevant. But I got off the subway and walked out of the station to watch a guy on a motorcycle get absolutely flattened by a dump truck. There was bones and guts sticking out and a massive trail of blood from where the guy first hit the ground to where the truck stopped. It was horrible. When I was younger, my mom told me we were going to see my grandma for the last time. I didn't understand that meant we were going to a funeral. IDK if this counts, but I was not expecting to see her dead. Thanksgiving when I was 11 years old. I was walking around the edge of a golf course with my father and a friend when I saw some legs sticking out from a large bush small tree. As I got closer, I could see there was a shotgun sitting between the legs, leaning up against the trunk. My father thought it was a prank. I pulled the branches back and witnessed something that I'll never forget. The sight of what was left of the face. The picture of what I presume to be his family in his lap. I wanted to simultaneously vomit, scream, and run away. I did the latter. Didn't eat for a few days.